Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited this afternoon to share this webinar with you today. So hopefully you've had a good day so far. I'm in Queensland, so I've had to adjust to the time for the rest of the state. So it's always a little bit confusing. So hopefully you've done a better job than that than I. I want to going to introduce Professor Fernanda Oda, all the way from California in the US. And she's going to be sharing some really important work, like her life work, basically, that she's been working on around challenging bias and upholding consent, and the research that she's done in social justice and behaviour practice. So Professor Oda holds a PhD in behavioural psychology for the University of Kansas. She's also a BCBAD, has done extensive research and publications on bias and consent. So we are so privileged to have her jump in with us and share this really important work with us today. So in this session, she's going to share insights from her work integrating consent and social justice with behavioural practice, which impacts all of us as behavioural practitioners. So what you'll learn this afternoon is you'll walk away with some essential skills and how to tackle some critical topics in behavioural practice that we face. Looking at defining and identifying examples of bias, what does that look like? Understand stimulus bias and biased behaviours, recognise examples of expressed consent and presumed consent. This is one of my favourite topics. I'm really passionate about this. Explore behaviour analytic research on social justice and bias. So super excited. And I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Professor Gusto, and he's going to give us a bit of an update before we get started.
Yeah. Hi, Tracy. Hi, everyone. I'm Elder. I'm speaking from Sydney, Kooringa Island. I'm a psychologist, work in the field of positive behavior support and also educational technologies. Currently, I'm working as a head of educational technology at PBS Together and as a uni professor. My passion is to empower practitioners to become agents of change in their fields. And today, I'm really excited to listen to Fernanda. Professor Fernanda. It's a professional whose career I have had the honor to follow for many years. I had the opportunity to work closely with her for a year in a specific project, and I see her as a true leader in our field. She has worked on social relevant topics and has significant contributions, not just as a researcher, but also as an educator and a professional in our field. I'm also, Tracy, just want to remember everyone that we already open PBS Together for the public. So we already have a workshop, online workshop, and a special comprehensive program to develop practitioners in this beautiful career. And basically, regarding the workshop, just a quick reminder, we still have a few spots available for this first workshop on fading restrictive practice that is going to happen next Wednesday. For more details on this session, you can visit our website online. Let me show here the address where you can find more information about this wonderful workshop next week. And also, we have the boot camp. That is our biggest program and our most important program to help to develop the skills of practitioners all around Australia. This is a comprehensive 8 months training program designed for professionals aiming to advance their career as a practitioner in the field. And especially, we are offering a special promotion rate until December 15th or until spots are filled. So be sure to act really soon. If you want to get access to more information, please jump on board on this website, pbstogether.com.au/bootcamp to check about it. And I want to present to you Professor Fernanda Oda.
Sorry, just before Fernanda starts, I just want to recognize our traditional owners of the land that we meet today. I'm on Bundjalung country. in beautiful Queensland, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Fernanda, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you, Elder. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. That was a very kind introduction. I got a little bit emotional because, as Elder said, we know each other for years now. We were counting maybe 17 years, if my math is correct. And I just met Tracy, but I already want to work with her. It's so wonderful to be here. And I'm here really to share a little bit of what I learned about topics related to bias, social justice, from a personal and professional perspective. And I also would like this to be a moment for us to share, and I want to learn more from you. So I'm really looking forward for some interactions. Feel free to use the chat. I will be reading it. Sometimes I'm going to have maybe a 5-second delay to receive it, but I welcome any comments, any questions that you have for me. All right, so let me change here the slides. All right. So I want to acknowledge some of the collaborators that helped me develop this line of research that I have on bias and trying to understand social justice from a scientific perspective. So I'm currently at the University of Pacific in California, but I'm going to give some examples of research studies that I conducted in Kansas, as well in Texas at the University of Houston Clear Lake. And I have this connection. It's really a deep emotional connection with the Federal University of Paraná, where I got my undergraduate degree in psychology and where I started to love to study behavior and to do social justice work. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I am looking forward to connect with you more. All right, this is a topic that is related to culture, and I just wanted to be very upfront about my identities and my potential biases, because what I'm going to present is based on my living experience. I was born and raised in Brazil, but my family is originally from Japan. I identify as Latina, as a woman, and I'm also queer. And I love doing work on feminism. I believe you had Professor Tacita maybe talking about relevant topics maybe a month ago. And I love Tacita. I love her work as well. And we have a lot of exchanges in terms of common interests. I also did a genetic test when I moved to the US, and I discovered that I'm a little bit Egyptian, and I'm very proud of this new identity. My first language is Portuguese, so if you can't understand my English, just let me know. I'm happy to clarify. It's important for me to have an effective communication with you. And one of my favorite hobbies is to nap. I love napping. I love sleeping. Now it's 7 p.m. for me, but we stay awake for hours and hours. Dinner for Brazilians is very late. I don't know if you know about this from Elder already, but yeah, the day is just starting here, and I took my nap already, so I have a lot of energy for this right now. Positionality statement. I think it's important to acknowledge potential biases and my experience, especially talking about social justice topics. So I mentioned some of these identities and also come from a journey that involved a lot of privilege. I had parents who supported me throughout my education, and they invested a lot in my education. Until now, I would say that they helped me. Being a professor in the US is not that easy. And I also have experienced some marginalization and otherness. And I believe that these experiences also influence, and I'm biased here, and influence also the topics that I decided to study. So we're going to talk about social justice. I'm going to give some examples of research and talk about decision-making process and how it relates to our daily life, our practice when we're working with clients, with learners, when we're in the position of therapists or teachers. So I like this definition of social justice. We believe that everyone deserves equal rights, opportunities, and treatment, regardless of your identities, abilities, and status. So we're talking here about rights to have access to health, education, privacy, rights for consent, and we are talking about all these topics that are socially and culturally relevant. So in terms of bias, I like to think that we can come from a perspective that we are all humans, we are all from the same species, but one very distinct important topic here is that we all have differences, right? So it could be differences in terms of how we look or how we behave, and these differences are important because they can guide a little bit, and I'm not sure why. I think it's the slide share. So the S is actually bias, and I can make this correction if you can't understand my slides. So we have biases that come from our learning experience, and sometimes we're going to be aware of them, and sometimes we will not. So a lot of our behaviors can be influenced by our learning experience. And when I think about bias, I like to think about defaults. So things that we think it's the right way to do something, that could be a bias, right? Some rules that we have about what is correct, what is incorrect, or what we should or we should not do. These are all biases that can be part of your thoughts, part of your own rules and values. And it could also be behaviors that you can see, how people maybe treat someone differently based on their identities or how they look or how they behave. All right. So we can define biases in different ways. I like the definitions from the American Psychological Association. And they have here that bias can consist of any tendency or preference. So that will be a definition that is more neutral, maybe, right? So we all have our own preferences of what do we like to eat, or what do we like to watch on Netflix, or how what time do we like to wake up. Bias can also be understood as a systematic error or a deviation. So as humans, we have our own learning experience, and we can view the world in a certain way that we can measure and observe and judge behavior that will have a tendency that may not be the reality or the truth for everybody. So it's kind of like representative of something that you want to study. And then the third type is the topic that I like to study more, is when it involves prejudice, when maybe someone's behavior that is biased will affect another person's life. So I come from a behavior-analytic perspective, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of my ABCs, and you may be familiar with that as well. But my perspective here, so we have behavior. This is the B, and behavior is influenced by what happens in our environment, in our context. So we have consequences that can influence if we're going to behave in that way more or less in the future. And we also have our behavior influenced by our context. So if I see something or someone, maybe I will behave in a certain way based on my bias. And we also consider that not only things that are present in the environment influence our behavior, but we also have motivating operations or motivations that can also influence how someone will behave. So that can also involve biological events, things that are happening inside us, that can also influence how we understand someone's behavior. All right. Two distinctions here. We have a bias that can be considered part of our environment. So people who maybe design our environment, or the way that we present things, for example, to a learner when they're making a choice, that could be a bias that is present in our environment. It could be objects, it could be the placement of the object or something that we present to someone. That can be a type of a stimulus bias. And another type of bias that I like to conceptualize is bias as behavior. So that's the B of the previous slides, right? So it could be a biased behavior. It could be a way that I behave that will some consequences can differ depending on the person that I'm interacting with. So I'm going to start with bias in the environment, and we can call this a stimulus bias. And what I have here, for example, very old pictures. I don't know if that looks familiar to some of you, maybe. So Crayola, if you maybe you used to do some drawings and coloring, and then you have Crayola in one of the first versions. You're gonna see maybe just a set of 6 or 7 colors. And I remember when I was in Brazil, and there was one color that was named as flesh in English, but in Portuguese would be skin color. And that will be the peach light pink color, right? And Crayola changed, and they not only have the plastic container version right now, and you can buy probably more than 56 colors, right, of crayons. And they even have the peach color as a replacement for the word flesh or skin color, as a way to be more inclusive, less bias on what is skin color, because there are so many variations, right, of skin color. There's no right or wrong. And as a kid, I remember that not having the peach color made me think back then, well, so maybe my skin color is not the right one, or how should I color myself, right? So this can create bias very, very early. So we're thinking about early interventions maybe. And now we have colors of the world crayons, and we have colors representing this diversity of skin tones that we have. We have this potential bias. So maybe you use questionnaires in your clinical work, in your educational work, to collect some information, demographic information about people you serve or you work with. And what are potential biases that you can see here if you have a questionnaire like that? So feel free to use the chat, and we're going to try to test if this feature works. So we have here, what is your gender? And you have male, female, and other. What kind of biases could you be introducing if you present this kind of questionnaire? Awesome, thank you. Binary gender bias. I love that. We are talking about genders that maybe just offer 2 options, male and female. And there could be a bias or assumption that these are the only possible gender identities that people have, right? Even if you include other, I don't know if people would like to put the other. I as a queer person, I would not feel included in this kind of questionnaire. Although I identify as female, a lot of folks in my community would not be included or would not be able to disclose something that could be important to them, right? So there could be a binary gender bias. Another potential bias could be the order. Why male comes first? Why female is second, right? So there are a lot of questionnaires that maybe you're going to see this model, or even the census in the US. Not a long time ago, it was just male and female without the other option, and we wouldn't have any demographic information about other folks. So that could be a potential bias there. All right. Specifically to my work related to individuals with autism and other disabilities. So during my master's and a little bit during my PhD experience, I work with individuals with different levels of ability. And we have documentation in various journals that individuals who have an ASD diagnosis may have also an identity that is considered gender diverse. So this is well documented in the literature of autism, developmental disability, and behavior analysts are talking more about it. So if you're working with an individual who has a ASD diagnosis, it's possible that they could identify somehow in a gender diverse category. So it's good to not make assumptions that the binary world is the only truth, and that's will apply to all clients. I think we need to be more open-minded when we are working with individuals. What kind of bias do you see this? So this is a very, very old ad, and you have, does your husband look younger than you do? And this is being described as a threat or a tragedy in someone's life, right? What if they find someone who looks younger than you? Any ideas of biases there? Okay, I'm gonna wait 5 more seconds. All right. Yes, marriage is the norm. Thank you. That's an example, right? So assuming that uh, being a wife to a husband is a thing. Age, yes, ageism could be present too. So it's not good to look old. It's not look good. The assumption there, right? The bias that your husband looks younger than you. Ageism, yes, cis, heterosexual bias for sure. So we have so many type of biases, and we can look maybe at our clinical materials, our educational materials, and see if maybe we are doing things in a biased way that potentially can cause harm or exclude someone or make someone feel that they are not part of that environment. Thank you so much. Great chat participation there. So yeah, that ad was very old. It was like a vintage ad that I like sometimes to see how the marketing industry changed or has been changing, I hope. And we still see anti-age products, right? Or saying how I don't know, maybe society is putting a rule or a bias there that being old or looking old is not good, or that there's less value on someone who is older than you, which is not true, right? So pay attention to these environmental biases, stimulus bias that could be present for you. This is a personal example. So my family is originally from Japan, and I don't know if you know the concept of mono and double eyelid. And some Asian cultures make this distinction. If you don't have the fold, you are considered monolid, which would be the before in that picture there. And then you have the after you use a glue or a tape. And I remember that was an idea of the ideal beauty. If you are a woman, if you're a girl, you needed to have the double eyelid for makeup. And this is one of the most common surgeries still in Japan, plastic surgery. So there was this bias in terms of beauty or what was considered feminine or correct, right? So these biases still exist. This is an example of a bias that maybe you're going to see in the toy store, in the grocery, you're going to see still the boys and girls, maybe with some signs, boys toys, girls toy, with the colors blue and pink, for example. And we have also some news or some research that is showing that maybe we are still having this distinction between gender toys in stores. All right. This is a bias that could be related to ableism, assuming that everybody can use the stairs in case of an emergency, right? What are the policies there? What people should do if they can't use the stairs and there's an emergency procedure, right? So it's not, we can't assume that everybody can use the stairs in cases of emergency. I wanted to share this with you because I was speechless when I saw this. So to use the disabled lift, please come upstairs and tell us that you need to use it, right? Bias, no awareness of bias. Yeah, not that great. Bias, maybe if you go shopping, not online, if you do the old way of going to the mall, you're going to see maybe that the displays will have a specific body type, specific body shape, and we are so diverse in terms of shapes, right? So maybe also indicating a gender bias as well in terms of how someone should dress themselves. And this one here, I wanted to share with you. And if you know, just use the chat. If you know a potential bias in these two technologies here, one is the soap dispenser, the other one is the oximeter to measure oxygen levels. If you know, just use the chat. But this is, I think it's a great example of technology bias that we have. So the soap dispenser uses infrared technology, and probably the people who developed that and tested only in a very specific population with white skin. So if you have darker skin, maybe you're not gonna get the soap. And that could happen in airports, in public spaces, and there are a lot of tests, and it went viral in social media when someone discovered that, and they did tests, and that's true. So some of the soap dispensers will not work for all people, and that's, it's just like a health concern. It's exclusion so many ways, and it can be cause so many types of harm. The other one is the oximeter. It's the same thing, and some darker skins will not have the precision in the measurement of oxygen, and this was discovered during the pandemic, right? So you think that your oxygen levels are good, and the equipment will say that, but it's not true. So that's a problem, that's an issue, and we should be more aware of this kind of environmental bias. So thinking about bias in the environment, I think about one of the line of research that I do, which is with words. I study verbal behavior, and I like to see how people react, how they behave when they see words and they read, or they have visuals. It doesn't necessarily to be vocal or written. It can be in the form of pictures as well. But this example here is an example of stimulus bias. So if you are buying maybe a ticket, a flight ticket, you have that someone already checked by default one box there. So we would like to keep you up to date with updates related to our product. So this is all the emails that you don't want to receive probably, but they want to send you. And if you're not paying attention, you are probably going to receive a lot, and you are going to run out of storage, right? So this happens, and this is also part of a whole science that people try to nudge your behavior, influence your behavior in a certain direction. So this is an example of a very, very biased presentation here. So if you want to buy travel insurance, this is already highlighted for you. Or if you don't want, remember, your trip could get delayed. You could miss a flight, right? Some aversive control there to try to make you feel guilty and give them money. All right, so there were some economists, Thaler and Stein. You may be familiar with the book. It became a bestseller, Nudge, and they will talk about choice architecture. So they conceptualize this idea that the way that we present a choice can influence someone's choice. And you can manipulate that. You can arrange your environment in a way to produce this kind of choice. So the nudge, the way that we can conceptualize the behavior analyst is that it's the A of the ABC, or the MO part, the motivation, that can influence your behavior in a way that can make you buy more or less, or make a choice more or less, depending on what you're targeting there. So the nudge literature, you're going to see in the form of opt-in and opt-out. From a perspective of consent, opt-in can also be described as an express consent. So if you do a nudge that is an opt-in, what you're going to do is you're not going to presume that someone wants to consent. You want them to act upon, you want them to make a decision to get access to something. For the opt-out, what you have is the presumed consent. You are assuming that someone wants to receive newsletter, or that they want to buy your product. And then you're going to, for example, have the box checked by default, right? And it's a very interesting literature, because it's going to be so dependent on the culture and the country you are in, because that can affect legislation and policies of a country. So, for example, in the US, there is no explicit law that makes the opt-out prohibited. So there's more opt-out marketing than opt-in. So they presume you want a service. And if you're not paying attention, you are going to sign up for newsletters, but not only newsletters. Think about any other health decisions that you need to make, any political or social decision, right? So it's a choice, and it's a choice that maybe someone is nudging for you to do, and not necessarily to benefit you, right? So there are some ethical implications there. Most countries in Europe will have legislations that will support the use of opt-in express consent. So if you are going to offer services, what you're going to do is you can't nudge by having the box checked by default, and you have to make someone make the choice as a more active approach there. Yes, so many subtle biases that can easily be overlooked. Yes. Yes. And I think from different perspectives, we need to discuss more, and we need to think about an ethical perspective of who is benefiting from that, right? Are our learners benefiting from that? Are our clients benefiting? So we have here an example of an opt-in, right? I agree to the Dropbox terms. So if you have any screenshots of opt-in and opt-out, send it to me because I collect them. I have here an opt-out example, and this is an example of an opt-out as well. So you are automatically subscribing to that, and then you can unsubscribe, right?
Fernando, it's sorry to interrupt, but the NDIS actually have an opt-out. So when we do our audit, so all of the organisations in Australia who are registered under the NDIS, when they do their audit and then they choose to, contact our clients or participants saying, hey, how's the service going? They have to opt out. And so that is kind of what we're given. So I just, had to jump in there because I'm like, oh my goodness. Sorry.
No, thanks for sharing. And I want to be clear that none of the arrangements are inherited good or bad. It really will depend on what you want to present as a choice, right? And what's the best decision. I think sometimes what happens is that the opt-in and out is not thoroughly planned, and you just make something that will work for your organization, that is more efficient, that you're going to get the results. And that could be a valid reason as well. Right? So I think I really like that you're thinking about, okay, what are the systems that we have in place, and have we thought about it? I think that's the exercise for us to think if maybe that could be a good or bad thing depending on who is signing up or opting out of something. So thanks for sharing, Tracy. Okay, so consent we can conceptualize as a voluntary approval given by any individual. And I wanted to put here the relation between these two topics that I'm talking. So a biased environment can prevent an informed decision or consent, right? So if you are putting there a nudge for someone to do something, and that could be misleading, that could cause confusion, that can prevent someone from making the decision that is good for them. And that can happen in various contexts there. So a biased environment could be the number of choices options. Sometimes we don't even give choices to our learners. That could be a bias too, right? And if you present maybe two, what are the two options that you're selecting? Are you really giving them autonomy to express their preferences? It could be the position, display, accessibility of items. So it's easy sometimes to, now people are talking about diversity, equity, inclusions, and we have books here, but the books is going to be in the shelf that nobody sees. It's not visible to everybody, right? So you can create a biased environment even if you have the items that are trying to promote whatever you want. Or unclear or confusing presentation of choice options. So we have a biased environment that we already talked, for example, in the toy section. And another type of framing that is common in this literature is the negative form. So sometimes the box will be checked or unchecked by default with the no option or do not, which can cause confusion as well. And I experience this daily. I see a lot of the do not options here. So if you see 1, 2, and 3, 4, let's say that you want to offer some services and you have, I want to without the unchecked box, I do not, I want, and I do not now with the checked box. Which option do you think that will promote more responding towards what you want? Let's say that you're selling something. So I want to receive this t-shirt that you're selling. Which option will have you receive more or have more people buying shirts? 3, that's a great guess. That's my guess too. That was my guess before doing research. 3, Why 3? Someone checked the box by default. If you're not paying attention, you're going to buy the t-shirt that maybe you don't want, you didn't pay attention to, right? So it's the response effort is so low. You don't even need to pay attention. You are going to buy automatically, right? And it's in the positive form. All right. So I went to the literature, and if you are not familiar with empirical research, basically what we want to do is systematically present some variables or things that we want to study to see the effect on the behavior. So this is a replication we published 2 years ago, but that was a study that we conducted replicating a marketing study. And the marketing study was saying that the group 2, the negative form with the unchecked box, produced highest level of enrollment. And I was so skeptical about it. It was like, why the negative with the unchecked box? And I did the replication then with my students, and then we replicated the results. So group 2 produces more of the behavior that you want to see from the perspective of the person arranging the environment for you. So based on this is, if you want someone to do something for you, you presented the negative form without the box check by default. So that one, if you are distracted, you also will fall for that, right? It's the negative form, so it's confusing. Maybe if you're paying attention and you think you're making the right choice, you're going to get the t-shirt. And also, if you're not paying attention, if you don't check the box, that means that you will enroll or that you will buy the shirt. Very confusing, right? But marketing people are using that, or policymakers are doing that as well. So just some graphs here, some data, and just showing that we replicated here. So we have the box checked by default, and we have the number of enrollment. And in our case, we wanted to see if students would ask for more academic activities. It was an optional activity for them. And of course, we wanted students to study more. And then we saw that there was really an effect. The way that you present the choice can really influence how students will have access to these materials. All right, my dissertation was related to this topic, but I wanted to apply to a social justice perspective. And from an ethical perspective, I wanted to see how people felt about the way that were presented the choice. So that's the social acceptability part. And I wanted to also see if the decision-making that they wanted really matched the decision in the moment. So after they were presented with the choice, I asked them to recall their previous choice. So you were asked a question, what did you choose? And maybe I'm not sure, or they said something that was the opposite of what they wanted. So we kind of matched to see if their thinking, the decision-making matched the decision, the box checking or unchecking. And then we have some results here. And also this is the social acceptability question. If you felt manipulated or not, strongly disagree and agree. So in terms of method here, I just wanted to share some data. I think it's important to collect data on someone's identity. Of course, it was optional. They didn't need to disclose. But we are talking about people who identify as 18 to 24 years old, majority, 65% white, 85% female, and where is it? Straight, majority here, 78%. And most of them had English as their first language. And then we presented this in the form of a survey. And then they had the choice in the 1, 2, 3, 4. It was randomized in a group design, but also we did a single subject as well. And we also have a questions to see if that would increase self-awareness of their own identities. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to try to do 5-6 more minutes of presentation so we can open for discussion. In terms of results, we observed that the unchecked positive had more responses in terms of pro-social. So here the question was, if you wanted to receive more information about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we didn't replicate previous results on nudge, on check and check box. And what we saw was that we observed more of the pro-social behavior that we wanted to see in the unchecked positive, which would be the group 3. Also, we collected data on how people maybe were thinking while they were doing the survey. And negative frame made people pay more attention to the screen for a longer time. So they submitted maybe the answer after 45 seconds, right? So we wanted to understand how people were thinking there as well. And in terms of recall, we found more correct recall of past choice for the checked positive frame. And we saw more incorrect or I'm not sure in the negative forms, groups 2 and 4, which could be problematic. And finally, for social acceptability, people in this study felt that they felt more manipulated when presented with the unchecked form of the unchecked positive, and the highest level of acceptability was with the check box checked by default in the positive frame. All right, so maybe there's a preference for a positive frame, and that could be dependent on the community, people you are doing the survey. That's an important consideration, and the negative frame can be problematic according to this replication that we had. All right, and now I want to briefly talk about bias as a behavior. So we have a response bias now. And for the response bias, we are thinking about specific behaviors that we can engage that can produce consequences that can be damaging or harmful for others. So this could be, in practical ways, assumptions of someone's personal or cultural identities based on how they look, or it could be in the form of prejudice or discrimination. So not only our environment could contain bias by people who designed it, but also our behaviors and our repertoire could be composed by some biased behaviors there. So biased behaviors in terms of consent, maybe you can assume that your learner really likes that or they want that without asking them, right? Or it could be in the form of presenting a choice in a way that they will know what you like, or maybe they will not make their choice because they want your social approval. That's an important consideration of what is acceptable or not. And also, you could think that you're asking for consent, but actually you're not, because you're biased. You think that they know how to respond to your verbal requests, for example, in the written or vocal form. And that's not true for all learners. We have diversity of abilities there. So in our environment, I really like that the website has there how we can support and celebrate neurodiversity. And we have here that we can assess someone's needs. And that was one of the research examples that I had also in my experience in my master's. So we can think about ableism or sexism as types of discrimination or things that can happen that can influence our behavior. At Pacific, we have a bias response team. So the good thing about bias is that you can think about behaviors that you can describe and maybe observe and measure that. The sad thing about bias is that sometimes it can be so subtle that it's hard to capture. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to capture all the information that we have. So for example, students, staff, and faculty can report to a team here if something happened in terms of bias during a class or in the internet or an email or a graffiti. So bias can be everywhere in form of behavior or environment as well. Skinner will talk about self-editing, and Skinner, the founder of behavior analysis, as we know now, he will talk about behaviors that we engage in that are very, very subtle. So do you know when you're sending a message, a text message to someone, and then you decide to rephrase that, you delete a sentence or, oh, let me make it better, right? This is self-editing. It's the process of thinking. It could be also part of a text message that by mistake you sent to someone. So we did some research on self-editing and bias in social media in my master's. So I just wanted to be mindful about time. I know that we had introductions and it took a little bit of like 5-10 minutes. So how long should I continue here? Do I have 2 minutes? 3? It's up to you. I'm flexible. Trace or Elder?
Yeah, keep going for another couple of minutes and then we'll open it up for questions. So that's great. Super interesting.
Thank you. So I'm going to just very quickly talk about a study that assessed potential gender bias. And we did a binary analysis in this approach here just for experimental purposes. Because it was one of the first studies that we did on this topic, and we didn't have a lot in our literature, we decided to do that with adults. So we had 28 adults with experience with online chat and social media. And the setting basically, the participant interacted with a computer, and I was pretending to be another participant, but I was just observing in an observation booth, and I was interacting with them using some scripts that we developed and a software that we developed as well. So this is an example of a screen that they could see, and the prompt was, you have to cooperate and work with another player to solve a problem together. And we wanted to collect data on potential bias there, and we could control there the male and female. We could export this data and analyze, created the script based on how people used. So we had some volunteers who pilot the software for us, and we created a total of 10 scenarios with confederates, perceived male and perceived female in terms of the name that was displayed. So Will and Amy were the same kind of script. The only change was that they thought that they were talking with Will and the other with Amy. We developed a software using Cloud9, the platform, JavaScript language, and the Cloud9 platform was actually bought by Amazon, so we don't have access to that. And I can give you more information about the technical parts of that. And we're gonna try to replicate the software in a collaboration that I have with a Brazilian university. And this is coming soon, so we want to replicate this study. But we measure disagreeing, interrupting, pressuring, and self-editing. And just to give you an example here of a graph of, for example, disagreeing. So that would mean, I think it's triangle. No, I think it's circle, right? So seeing this kind of disagreement there in cooperative games using words or using letters. So here I had control over the team answer. So I could control also the performance in terms of points. And we have a study published on that if you want more information about it. But we have that female and male participant disagreed, interrupted, and pressured. And we have some interesting data there in terms of what was sent to the other person and what was deleted, the self-editing part as well. So for example, my favorite graph here, if you're ready, this is maybe my favorite graph for any research study that I had here, because we have the self-editing there. So that F word was not sent to the participant, and that was only emitted in the presence of Jennifer, but not in the presence of Will, although they said the exact same things, right? So it could potentially be a gender bias there. All right, if you want more information about it, you can access this. And just some general guidelines here, what I have here, my final thoughts. Work on your self-awareness and try to be more aware of potential biases. I think that's an important work for changing policies in our organizations, in our universities, in our society, to try to promote some equity inclusion, making sure that the default is not just benefiting one group. And then we can have more representation and visibility of diversity of behaviors and how we express ourselves as humans. If you want more information, I'm happy to send the slides to you. We have our lab here at Pacific. We have social media. We just launched recently, and we like to connect with people from different countries, with different experiences as well. And this is my email. If you want to have more information about it, feel free to contact me. And thank you so much for your participation as well. And I'm happy to take any questions or points for discussion.
All right, we have a few minutes for questions.
I'll just ask you a question while everyone's warming up. I just thought it was really super interesting that with those check boxes, the duration was longer for the unchecked negative box, and yet the recall was much lower. I thought wow, that's like, it's super interesting, isn't it? I just found that really interesting.
Yes, I thanks for bringing that up, because that's one of my favorite parts of that study too. Because I really wanted to see how long someone will take for make a decision, and that can be important, right? Because we have different individuals who maybe need more time to think about it, and does the time that you spend doing something correlate with the accuracy of you reporting that, right? Not necessarily, right? But maybe people will think more if they have the no there in the screen. So if you want maybe someone to pay more attention to something that you want to say, the negative form can recruit this kind of attention there. That will not mean that they will understand what you're saying. That will really depend on the context that you are, but that's an important consideration there.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. Nathan, I have a question. How can this be taken into account considering those with disabilities, cognitive, with research showing that minimal option specific working is recommended?
Yes. Oh, excellent question. Yes, I think this can be taken into account into at least two different ways. One is assessment, and the other one will be intervention. So you can try to assess with your learner, with someone who has disabilities, what is their cognitive level, how they respond to verbal commands, or maybe a written consent or a vocal consent, right? You need to make sure that they are responding in a way that corresponds to their autonomy and preferences as well. So one area of intervention in terms of bias is try to assess your learner skills in an individual way, in a way that you can really try to understand how they are thinking or how they would respond to something. The other second area, I would say, it's intervention, and you can really try to find ways to change the environment to promote more autonomy. And I love the research on social acceptability, not only in research studies, but also in practice. Do you really assess how your learners are feeling and what do they really like? Or are you just making assumptions about things? And when you ask these questions, try to make sure that you are minimizing a little bit of the power imbalances and they have a safe environment to express their preferences as well.
Mm-hmm. One more question. Great presentation. Thank you. I'll go and reflect of my here is biasness, not business, and how it can impact on my practice approach and impact on personalized support. It's more comment.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for doing this reflection. This is it's really an exercise, sometimes daily exercise. We need to be aware of our own behavior and how this can affect others. And the environment changes too. So it's ongoing work. We're always trying to learn different ways to have our behaviors being more acceptable and also appropriate for the context. So thank you.
Yeah, we have one more comment here. Support workers who provide daily support to people with disabilities who say that behavior is just bad behavior.
Yes.
They are attention seeking, etc. And well,
Right.
our work staff is really significant.
Yes.
We have
That could be a bias, right? You judge a behavior as bad, you judge as someone, oh, they just want attention, right? So that could be a bias that can really impact services. So yes, we really need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, we have two more questions here. I'm working on adding critical reflection to my plans of the writer and potentially from service providers in the disability space. Any tips on how to get service providers on board?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I really like this because even if we think that in a perfect world, we all want to be engaging professionally, right? The motivation might be different, right? Some people might not be on board to do that. What I like to do is try to find sometimes common ground and try to see what the common motivation is for that client. So they probably, I hope, they want the best for the clients as well. And you can try to work on systems that can be efficient from their perspective, but also that respect autonomy as well. I think trying to show what are the positive consequences of paying attention to this bias can really, really help Probably they want to receive great reviews about their work. They want clients happy. They want clients and learners who learn. So that could be a common motivation, and try to work then on how to make people feel more included in the process as well.
Yeah. Nathan has a question that I think goes in the same direction. Is there a way that this can be assessed in terms of potential bias from implementing providers? For example, are there ways to address and support stakeholders to address bias?
Yes. Thank you for that. One of the strategies that I really like is try to incorporate social justice work and training to staff. So you can do it in different ways. I do some behavior consultation on diversity, equity, and inclusion to try to talk with leaders, to try to talk with staff about identities, and try to talk about their own potential biases in a way that we can reflect about all these intersections of identities, right? So what is the norm in our organization, or maybe what kind of bias are present? And maybe it is because someone come from a specific background, they had a specific experience. So I think making the leaders or providers or staff involved in this process of making them more self-aware could be a huge gain for an organization. So yeah, make them do their work too, and provide trainings and resources for them to reflect on their own identities.
Yeah, one more question here. How would you recommend we work with people with profound intellectual disabilities to gain informed consent for assessing support service?
Yes. I think there is a whole literature that I would like to recommend that people are talking more about assent. So we can, and I believe Professor Tacita talked a little bit about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to start finding new ways to observe and pay attention to behaviors that are relevant, related to consent. And sometimes it's not going to be the verbal form, right? Some individuals with profound intellectual disabilities will not have a functional communication system to express via words or signs or pictures. One of the things that we can measure is sometimes is the affect or how someone is expressing discomfort. For example, if you have a client who cries or engages in behavior of eloping or trying to get out of the room, that could be a measure there, right? Maybe they don't want to be there. So we need to think consent beyond words and written words and vocal, and we need to pay attention to these other behaviors, emotional respondings that can indicate someone's preferences and rights. So thank you for bringing that up.
Fantastic. We have a few more comments. Jessica, it was about a question a few minutes ago. Use a presumed capacity approach. I don't remember exactly what was the question that we are discussing, but it's a good tip. Here, there is other reaction. Nathan, extremely helpful. There is a question about the slides. You're not going to provide slides, but the video, Professor Fernanda allows us to maintain it on YouTube, so you can use the same link to access this content again.
Awesome.
Love this webinar. Thank you.
Thank
you. Great presentation.
Thank you so much. And again, feel free to email me if you want to chat more. And I love collaborating. I love connecting with people. So thank you for giving me space to share my passion here.
It was super great, like really interesting. And I really am quite passionate about, perceived consent, because I think that, as a lot of people have shared in the chat, it happens quite a lot, with the people that we're supporting. And I was just thinking as well, I think I was reading some research recently in regards to measuring assent for people who don't have a functional means of communication. And now we're trying to measure the joy rather than measure like a negative kind of response. So measuring what does joy look like for this person? Yes. And so then that's how we know that we're kind of doing something that they prefer, because this is what joy looks like for them. I thought that was really, really nice. Yeah.
Very interesting. No, I'm so glad that we are going this direction now and talking more about different ways to perceive assent, consent, and clients' preferences and autonomy. So yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Super, super exciting. Helder, do you just want to do a bit of a wrap up and explain what's
just
coming up very quickly before we say goodbye? Thank you so much, Fernanda.
It was a pleasure to meet you, Tracy. Thank you.
Fernanda, thank you very much. It was really cool to listen to you, all the research that we already did in this field and all the knowledge that we bring together. So just to remember, next week we have this beautiful workshop, Fading Restrictive Practice. We have a few more spots available. Please run. It's going to be really amazing. And we also have other event really soon, which is the bootcamp, our comprehensive program, 8 months of training with live classes, a lot of self-paced courses, public supervision, and a lot of really cool things that you can enjoy with us along 8 months next year. We have just a few spots. Jump on board if you want to improve your career as a positive behavior practitioner. It's going to be really awesome to have you with us on board. Thank you very much for everyone for being with us in the afternoon.
I think that, Regina, someone's just asking for your email. Are you able to show your email again very quickly? I think a couple of people were keen to connect with you, which is really, really nice. Thank you.
I just inserted
okay, thanks.
Too.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your time this afternoon with us. And it was an absolute pleasure. As Fernanda, I think you can see with all the positive affirmations in the chat there, people really appreciated your time and sharing your life work and passion with us today. It was really inspiring. It's always great to hear from passionate people who are, so focused on upholding people's human rights and critical, such critical work. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for your time, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye everybody. Bye.